We have gone through up to the end of Daniel chapter 9. Last week we did one last discussion on the topic of what the meaning is of those 70 weeks. As a matter of fact, I don't even think we were finished the discussion because we were talking about 1844 and whether or not there was any significance to 1844. But some aspects of what we are looking at, we will have to wait until we get to Revelation to really get into it. I think what we looked at last week was the fact that the prophecy in Daniel 8 about the 2300 days, it's an end time prophecy. At least we know the time concludes at the time of the end, because the angel told Daniel, at the time of the end shall be the vision. And we went through all the calculations and saw that, as best as we can figure, those 2300 days would have come to an end in 1844. Now, before we go to chapter 10, I'll just reinforce what I said last week. There is a lot of debate and discussion about the year 1844. Everybody has a different opinion. I mean, the Adventists are convinced it was the time that marked the beginning of something they call the investigative judgment. Most Christians believe that Adventists are way off track and they are confused because they are claiming the date 1844 when it marked a great disappointment. It marked a point in time where somebody misunderstood the Bible, made a wrong prediction, and a whole lot of Christians were deceived. You know, they thought that Jesus would come in 1844. He didn't come. So when I tacitly agree with 1844, I know that there's going to be a lot of opposition. I understand that. Not everybody will agree. But I look at the Bible, I look at the evidence of history, I look at all the different theories that are out there, and I still say, I've looked at a lot of things. I don't see anything that fits better than 1844, the date 1844. I don't believe that Adventists are presenting the event correctly. I think what they think happened in 1844, it is very poorly expressed. There are some bad ideas there, but the date, I don't see anything better. My position is, if anybody in this world can show me something that makes better sense, I'm willing to go with it. Better sense. But I look at all the alternatives. A lot of the people who criticize the date, they have nothing to offer in return, nothing. They criticize the date because they say William Miller made a mistake. William Miller predicted the coming of Jesus and it never happened. When you ask them, what does it mean? They don't have any idea. They don't have any answer. So that's not a good alternative as far as I'm concerned. When I look at the time of the end, if you say that 1844 is round about the beginning of the time of the end, I could agree with this from the Bible. If you tell me that something extraordinary is to happen in the time of the end, according to the Bible, I will agree with you wholeheartedly. It is there in the Bible. Those of you who are a part of this fellowship for some time, you know we have gone through an examination of the meaning of the feast days. And we've gone through the book of Revelation on a couple of occasions, are now in the process of going through again. And you know why I say this. You know that there are some tremendous events which are to happen in the plan of God, and they center on our time. And so 1844 was like 170 something years ago, 180 something maybe. But still, I believe it's a significant marker in time. And the more we study the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, the more we are going to see that more and more clearly. Anyway, I think that's enough for Daniel 8 and 9 for the moment, and we will come back to it when we get to Revelation. But at the moment now, we're going to go to Daniel chapter 10, which is the next chapter. We've gone through from 1 to 9, and so we move on to chapter 10 at this point. We'll just read and comment as we go along. And I always want to remind you, since it's our Bible study, our Bible class, I really have an anxiety that everybody should understand as we go along. So please, if I make a point, if I say something and it's not clear, you're welcome to interrupt the meeting and to ask questions. All right? Last time, there was a request made that we hold the answers to the end, and I know that's a good idea, and I generally prefer to do that. But when you're doing a sermon, it's different from a Bible study. In a sermon, yes, hold the questions till the end, but a Bible study where you're going through verse by verse, I think it's very important that you understand on the spot what is being said. So we go through a verse and there's an interpretation and you don't understand. Please, by all means, stop me. Sister Suzanne, go ahead.
Actually, I think I was misunderstood when I made my request last week. I was actually talking about the end of the sermons during morning worship. If we could finish with prayer before questions.
Okay.
That's actually what I meant.
Okay, thank you, Sister Suzanne. And that's actually a good point. I didn't follow that protocol this morning, but now that you bring it up again and highlight it, I'm definitely going to try to remember to do that. And you know how my head is, I often forget, but a little reminder will keep me on track. So, thank you, Sister Suzanne. All right. But for Bible class, I want to make sure we understand. That's what we're striving for in the Bible class. Please, I'm not saying to interrupt and make long, drawn-out arguments or comments. I know we have that danger, but questions, please make sure that we understand, all right? So, Daniel 10. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar. And the thing was true, but the time appointed was long. And he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. Now this is the 3rd year of Cyrus. I can't give you all the historical dates, but I think the last vision that Daniel had, if you go back to chapter 8, it says that this was the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar. Now you know that Belshazzar died. Let me see what year he died. If you go back to chapter 6, it says, chapter 5, it tells you about Belshazzar's feast. It doesn't tell you what year this was. Belshazzar's feast was the last feast he had. That night they killed him. The Medes and the Persians took over the empire. So when you go to chapter 8, it says, in the 3rd year of his reign, that's when Daniel had the chapter about the ram and the he-goat. I don't know what year this was, how many years it was before Belshazzar lost the kingdom. But then the next vision he has, let me see what 9 says. 9 is the 1st year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus of the seed of the Medes. So let me just give you a little broad explanation. Belshazzar was the last king of Babylon. The night when he was having the feast and the hand appeared writing on the wall is the night when he was killed. That night, the Medes and the Persians took the kingdom. Now, Daniel 9 says the 1st year of Darius. Darius was the first king of the Medo-Persian Empire after they conquered Babylon. Darius became king. His nephew was Cyrus. Cyrus was not king because out of respect for his uncle Darius, he gave deference to him and Darius became the king. So Darius ruled the Medo-Persian Empire. But the Persians were the greater part of the empire and Darius was the leader of the Cyrus Not that Cyrus was the head of the Persians. So when Darius died, then Cyrus became the king. So it says in the 3rd year of Cyrus, the king of Persia, Daniel had this vision. So it was after Belshazzar, after Darius. So this was by this time Daniel is an old man, but God is still speaking to him. Now, he tells you that his name was called Belteshazzar. This was the name they gave him when he went to live in Babylon, when they captured him and put him in Babylon. You will remember that King Nebuchadnezzar gave them names, and he called Daniel Belteshazzar. It says, according to the name of his god. Bel was a famous Babylonian, and he called Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these are the names that they are popularly known by, but these were their Babylonian names. So Daniel says about this vision that he had, the thing was true, but the time appointed was long. And he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. Now I'm going to tell you the truth. It says Daniel understood the vision. And in this way, if he really means he understood everything in it, he is better off than anybody else in the world today. Because I'll tell you, I don't know of anybody who fully understands the prophecy of Daniel 10, 11, 12. I myself have been studying it for 50 years, and there are parts of it that are still not clear to me. So Daniel is better off if he understood everything. But I don't think he did. I think when he says he understood, I think he meant, okay, I get the overall plan of what is being said here. So we will look on, it actually takes in Daniel 10, 11, and 12. And if you ever read Daniel 11, you know it's a very complicated prophecy. We're going to try to go through and do the best we can. But I can tell you there are some parts of it that I don't think anybody in the world understands, although there are different theories. Okay? Yes, Brother Kip, go ahead.
So I Googled those years, and according to what Google says, 539 is when Belshazzar died, and 536 was the 3rd year of the reign of King Cyrus.
539, Belshazzar died,
Yeah,
and then 536, so that would have been 3 years later. So when would Darius have been king? Unless they mean that Cyrus was ruling co-jointly at the same time as Darius. Maybe that's what they mean. Because 536 would have been, 3 years later? Yes. So it would mean that Cyrus.
So like he only ruled for 3 years.
Who, Darius?
Yeah.
No, look at what Kip said. Kip says that Cyrus' 3rd year was 536.
Remember the numbers going backwards as it comes to Christ.
Right. That means his 1st year would have been 539.
Right.
Which would have been the year Belshazzar died.
Right.
That means there was no time for Darius to rule.
No. It's Darius. And I thought I heard him say Darius.
No, it's Cyrus. He said Cyrus. He said Cyrus, according to Google, Cyrus began to reign in 536. So I would say that it must mean that Cyrus and Darius
Right,
were
so that's correct. Because the numbers going backwards. Remember the numbers counting down now in BC.
Yeah,
539 is when Darius came, and then 3 years later, 536, Cyrus started.
No, 539 was not when. No, 536 was not when Cyrus started. 536 was the 3rd year of Cyrus. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
536 was the 3rd year of Cyrus. So the 1st year of Cyrus would have been 539. Same year when Belshazzar died. So I'm saying that what the explanation must be that they're counting that Darius and Cyrus are ruling jointly together, which is a reasonable explanation because it often happened that way. Okay, anyway, just some interesting little side notes that help us to come more fully with the timing and everything. Now, Daniel says an interesting thing here. He says the thing was true. Why does he say this? Everything that God says is true. I'm not sure why Daniel puts in this little piece. The thing was true. You know, I don't think he says this about the rest of his prophecies, so I don't know why he makes the point. But then he goes on to say, but the time appointed was long. And again, I'm asking, I wonder how he knows, because in this prophecy in particular, I don't believe the angel said anything about it being long. But I know in the prophecy in Daniel 8, in chapter 8, the angel did say it will be after many days and it would be at the time of the end. Well, this one he's also told would apply to the time of the end. So maybe he's putting both visions together and he's saying if the one I had previously was a long time and it applied to the time of the end, then this one is also at the time of the end, so this one is also long. Maybe that's where he's making the connection. But he goes on to emphasize, it says he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. Now, why does he say this? I think because when you go back to chapter 8, he emphasizes at the end of chapter 8 that I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. And you can see right there where the angel had said to him, shut up the vision, for it shall be for many days. So he was told in chapter 8 that the vision that applies to the time of the end, if you look a little further up, it will tell you, he said, understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. So make the connection. At the time of the end, for many days. Yeah. And oh yes, the angel did say, and the vision of the morning which was told is true. All of these things he was told about this vision in chapter 8. And I can't help believing that as he comes to this vision in chapter 10, there's something that is making a connection. Because here he's told, here he says the same thing. The thing is true. The time appointed is long. And he understood the thing. And he had understanding of the vision. So I leave it up to you to decide. But I'm saying that when you look at the things he mentions, it is true. It is after many days. I understand. When you go back to chapter 8 and says, and the angel says, it's true. It's after many days. It's the time of the end. And it is true. It's the same exact phrases. I think Daniel is making a connection between this vision and the one he had there in chapter 8. Now you can decide if that makes sense or not, but for me it seems to make sense that he's making a connection. And here's the thing. The prophecies of Daniel are connected. In what way? Chapter 2 is repeated in chapter 7, but in more detail and from a different perspective. Chapter 2 and chapter 7 are repeated in chapter 8, but from a different perspective. Chapter 2, chapter 7, and chapter 8 are repeated in chapters 11 and 12, but from a different perspective. So it's 4 different times that the same prophecy comes, but in different ways and with more detail. So it's the most logical thing in the world that you connect them together. Sometimes you can't understand something in chapter 8. Look at chapter 7 and see what comes at that point, and then you can figure out what chapter 8 is saying. Same with all of these prophecies. That's why sometimes you look at a harmony of the prophecies of Daniel, and you will see Babylon across at the top. The second stream you see Medo-Persia. The third stream you'll see Greece. The fourth one you'll see Rome, and you'll see how it fits right across all of these prophecies, because they are the same prophecy repeated in greater detail, and also, very important, from a different angle each time. So anyway, it says, in those days I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I'm not sure why he uses the word mourning. I think it's like an Old Testament phrase that means he was really going through a period of self-denial, right? Because mourning for them was not necessarily meaning that you are sad. It means you are going through the ceremonies associated with mourning. You will remember that in the Old Testament, from time to time, when they had somebody died, you know what they did? They hired mourners. A strange thing, right? You hire people to come and cry and make noise. So that gives you an idea of what it means when you say a period of mourning. You're not necessarily sad, but you are coming to put on the outward form of mourning. You know, when somebody was, a lot of what happened in the Old Testament especially was formalism and ceremonialism. So if you were sorry for something, what did you do? You sat down in ashes and you put on sackcloth and you put ashes on your head. You went through outward forms. And sometimes you didn't have to be sorry about anything, but you went and sat in the ashes and you put on sackcloth and you made people see that you were mourning, even though in your heart maybe there wasn't any mourning. So this was the Old Testament understanding of certain things like that. It was all about ceremony. And you will understand why today, when you call somebody a ritualist or a ceremonial person, usually it's not very complimentary, because you might even be saying the person is a hypocrite. You act like you really feel this way, but it's just outward, it's not inward. So when Daniel says he was mourning for 3 weeks, it doesn't mean that he was in a state of distress. It could simply mean that he was in a place where he put on. He was in a state where he was going through some self-denial. That's what I think it really means. If you look at what it says in verse 3, I ate no pleasant bread. So he was eating food that didn't taste so good. Neither came flesh nor wine in my mouth. So what I would say is that it seems to me that normally Daniel would eat flesh and he would take a little wine. Because if he didn't, why would he mention that I ate no pleasant bread and no flesh nor wine came into my mouth? He's saying that I didn't do this for 3 weeks, 3 full weeks. That means that normally it seems like he would do things like this. Now, why do I mention this? I mention it because in Daniel chapter 1, it says that Daniel refused to eat the king's meat. If you remember in Daniel chapter 1, it says that Daniel refused to eat the king's meat. And sometimes some people use this to say, in verse 8 it says, Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. And because of this, some people say that it means that Daniel was a strict vegetarian. And they use this as a passage to promote the vegetarian lifestyle. Now, I'm not saying vegetarianism is not a good lifestyle, but I'm saying that when you come to the Bible, you want to be perfectly fair. If Daniel was a vegetarian at this point in his life, later on he was not, based on what we are reading. So I think that when it says here, he did not defile himself with the king's meat, I think it specifically means the food that was coming from the king's table, the king's meat and the king's wine. It probably was particularly unhealthy. Maybe it was offered to idols, and that is why Daniel refused it. Not because he was vegetarian or anything like that. I don't think so, because that was not something that was specially promoted in Israel as a sign of holiness. Anyway, in chapter 10 here, you get a further insight. He didn't eat any pleasant bread. That means he wasn't eating pleasant tasting food, maybe just bread and water. And he also says, neither did I anoint myself. Now, just to be a little gross, I think that's kind of like saying he didn't put on any deodorant. but maybe it wasn't quite as bad as that. I would imagine that maybe if he was a man, it would mean he didn't put on any cologne or any perfume. I don't know what they did, right? I myself don't go for those things. I mean, I use my deodorant, but I don't like cologne and perfume like some men. I just prefer natural smells. But I guess they would anoint their head with oil, and they would, put on a little smell maybe. But for 3 weeks, none of those things. Clearly, he was looking for something from God, and as a part of the process, he put himself in a state of self-denial, almost you could say voluntary suffering. Brother Ian and then Brother Kip.
I can't help thinking though, based on what I read here, what Daniel is going through, that he might have been going through a period of concern, deep concern, and almost to the point where he lost interest in these things. He lost interest in eating right and these things because he was still eating, not that he was fasting. He was still eating, just that he wasn't eating the kind of foods that he would eat because he's just not in the mood for it. He wants something is resting on his mind. He wants to get the answer for it, and so he has shifted his focus to his normal way of living into this, and so he has neglected to do these things. That's the impression I get. I don't know.
Okay, it could be. The only thing I would say, if I am going to eat, I'll still like to eat something that tastes good. So if I am distressed over something that I don't want to eat, then I'll fast, right? But if I still feel the need to eat, I'm not going to find the most distasteful thing to eat. I'm going to eat something that I can still enjoy if I'm going to eat, So that's why I think that maybe he was deliberately depriving himself, because I'm going to tell you something, right? This Friday, yesterday, in the morning, I kind of made a little commitment between God and myself, kind of like a renewal to some things. And you know what I said to the Lord? I'm going to forget. It's not going to stick in my mind. And in my discussion with the Lord, I said, what can I do to make sure I remember? And the thought came to me, why don't you fast? Why don't you deprive yourself of food? Because if you fast, you are certain to remember. Every time you feel a little hunger, you are going to be forced to remember. Now, as most of you can see, I am thin. I'm losing weight. I'm the thinnest one in my family among my brothers and sisters. Maybe because I have been running all my life. But anyway, the thought came to me, no, don't deprive yourself of food because you need to keep eating. Do something else. So I kind of let it ride. And I didn't fast. And because of that, I found that I forgot during the day the thing that I wanted to remember. So I just make the point because I was thinking if I had been fasting, I wouldn't have forgotten. Because every time I felt the pangs of hunger, it would have been sharply etched on my mind. This is why you are doing this today. So just from that perspective, I kind of think that maybe Daniel was deliberately doing something because he wanted to keep his focus and not lose sight of his target. So just a thought there.
Yeah,
But
I
okay.
just want to add though that most other translations say in those days, he said, I ate no food for delight. So, in other words, he was eating for the pleasure of eating.
Yes,
So that's another way of looking at it.
sure. Brother Kip, go ahead.
I might have missed it, but is the mourning that he's doing, is it because of the vision that he understood? Is that
Well,
what you?
no. This is his mourning before he gets the vision. It's after he goes through this period of mourning that he gets the vision. Now, here's my thinking. Okay, we know that he had the vision in chapter 8. He had that vision in the third year of Belshazzar, I believe it was, and then he got the interpretation in Daniel 9. in the third year of Darius, I think it was, if I'm remembering correctly. But anyway, the point is that he says there are things about this vision of chapter 8 that he didn't understand. Even when the angel came back in chapter 9, there were some things he understood, but some things he didn't understand. Now, this is several years later. This is the third year of Cyrus. Why does Daniel go back, and why is he fasting and praying? I think Daniel wants to understand these earlier visions. He has been getting visions, and he doesn't know what they mean. And I think if I am in Daniel's place, and I'm not in Daniel's place, but right now there are certain things in the prophecies I am praying about. I haven't fasted about them, but maybe I should. Because, just because it helps a person to keep focused. But, for example, I'm trying to get a clearer understanding of what exactly is the mark of the beast. I disagree with many things, but I don't have a clear-cut idea that I can say this definitely is so. What about the king of the north? I feel that that is an important prophecy, and I still don't have a satisfactory understanding of it. And one or two things like that. So I'm praying, and I'm expecting that the Lord will give an answer. But I think Daniel is going through something like this. He wants to understand the things that he has been shown, and so he goes back to God, and he's fasting and praying, going through this partial fast, I would call it, for 3 weeks. Why? He wants to understand the vision he has had before. He wants good understanding because, he's an old man by now. And by this time, by the time of Cyrus, then it's time for the Jews to return to Jerusalem. The 70 years of captivity should be up by now. But he doesn't understand this time of the end, and it will be after many days. He doesn't understand. And so he does what God's children usually do. They go to God and they are seeking. I think that is what he's mourning about. And that is why God comes to him and gives him a further vision that explains in much greater detail the meaning of that vision of chapter 8. So that's what I think happens. All right, so he said he did not anoint himself at all till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. And in the 4 and 20th day, the 24th day of the first month, that would be the month Abib, according to the Jewish calendar. In the 24th day of the first month, as I was by the side of the great river, which is Hiddekel, and according to my translation on the right-hand side, this is what is now called the Tigris River. In the days of Daniel, it was called the Hiddekel River. So Daniel, for some reason, is down by the side of the river Hiddekel. And this is where he has a vision. He says, "Then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with a fine gold of Uphaz." It says, his body also was like the beryl. Beryl is a precious stone. I don't remember what color is the beryl. I'm sure somebody will tell me in a minute. His body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. Now, let me see. Beryl. Okay, it says here in the note that it's kind of yellow. It's kind of a yellow color. The beryl is a yellowish color. So, let me ask a question before I go any further. This image and this description, somebody maybe can answer, whether you want to type it or speak it. What does this remind you of? this description of this person.
Revelation. The description in Revelation.
Thank you, Sister Diane. I'm going to put both of them side by side on the screen so you can see for yourself.
And Ezekiel also in one?
I beg your pardon?
Ezekiel 1 also describes, and I'm thinking it's Jesus.
I never thought of Ezekiel. Ezekiel didn't come to my mind at all. We'll look at Ezekiel afterwards, but let us first look at Revelation. And let me give you the King James Version, so we can get the exact thing. If you go down in Revelation 1, okay? All right, let's see if we can make this 1-to-1. He says, a certain man, he was wearing linen, and around his waist there was fine gold. It says in Revelation 1 and verse 13, in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man. It says he has on a garment down to his foot. It doesn't say like linen, but it says girt about the paps with a golden girdle. The paps here, where are the paps? Let me see. According to the New American Standard Bible, it says it's his chest. All right, the chest is a little higher than the loins, but the similarity is that both of them have gold tied around their bodies, right? What else does it say? His body was like the beryl, and his face like the appearance of lightning, and his eyes like lamps of fire. See, it says here, his eyes were as a flame of fire. It doesn't tell you that his face was like lightning, but it says his eyes were like a flame of fire. Here it says his eyes were like lamps of fire. It says his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass. It says here his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace. And the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. It says here his voice was as the sound of many waters. So, I don't think there's any question here that this person, it seems very clear to me that this person is the same person. If you take the description here in Daniel chapter 10, and you take the description here in Revelation chapter 1, it seems very obvious that they're both talking about the same person. And of course, we know that this person is Jesus because it says he was like unto the Son of Man. But of course, here's another thing. In the Old Testament, Jesus was not called Jesus. He was a different identity. And this identity, many Christians claim that it was not really Jesus. But I think we're here in this room, we have looked at it, and I think most of us agree that this identity is correct, that Jesus in the Old Testament was the same person that was called Michael, the chief of the angels, Michael the archangel. It was not that he was an angel in the ordinary sense of the word, but that he was a messenger. He was God's representative. He was the true divine Son of God. But in the Old Testament, his name or his title was Michael, and Michael means he who is like God. So this is a person who appears to Daniel here, just like Jesus appeared to John on the Isle of Patmos with a similar appearance, his glorified form. Now, you will see as we continue to study that this person is Michael, the person that Daniel sees here. It is Michael. Go ahead, Sister Dad.
Yeah, in Exodus, he's referred to as the angel of the Lord. So, that means he's the messenger of Yah. So to not think he's Michael, as an angel, he's not an angel. He is a messenger of Yah, and that's what it's saying. But he's referred to as the angel of the Lord.
Right. And strictly speaking, he's an angel, and I'll tell you why. Because the word angel is from a Greek word angelos, and the word angelos means a messenger. And Jesus is a messenger. He was in the old covenant, he is in the new covenant, the messenger of Yahweh. But at the same time, because there are many heavenly messengers, they're all called angels, which means messengers. So the word angel has become associated with these lesser messengers. And so to say that Jesus or Michael is a messenger seems to be putting him down, seems to be belittling him, but it's not true. Every person who represents the Almighty, who speaks on his behalf, is his messenger. And Jesus told us clearly while he was here that he didn't come in his own name, he came in the name of the Father. He was the representative of the Father. He was a messenger of the Father. So to say he was an angel is not disrespect. It simply means that he's representing somebody greater. It doesn't mean that he's a created angel. So just a little bit of confusion, because words get mixed up all the time. Words change their meaning. Words get embedded into a certain way of thinking. Like when I was a boy, we said, I'm feeling gay. All right, go out on the street and say it today, especially in Jamaica, and you will be scorned and shunned, and everybody will think you are saying something completely different because they changed the meaning of the word. Anyway, that's by the way. Sister Anita, go ahead.
Speaking of the name of Jesus, wasn't he called the Lord thy God in the Old Testament? If we can remember when God gave Moses and the children of Israel instructions and so on, and when he finished speaking to them, he would say, I am the Lord thy God.
Yes, but let me explain something. There's something that I think is not very clear, and it's a good opportunity for me to just comment on it. The identity of Jesus in the Old Testament is different than the label that he used when he was speaking on behalf of Jehovah. The label he used is different from his identity. His identity was Michael. But when he spoke on behalf of Yahweh, he spoke as if he was Yahweh. For example, and I want to make the distinction clear. You will remember that Jesus appeared to Moses at the burning bush. And it says very clearly that the angel of the Lord appeared to Moses at the bush. Stephen says in Acts chapter 7 that it was an angel that spoke to him out of the bush. And what does the angel say? The angel says, I am that I am. And he says, I am Yahweh. He uses the name Yahweh, and yet the Bible says it was an angel. Now, this doesn't mean that this angel was Yahweh or that this angel was the Lord God. Even if it was Jesus, it means that he is speaking as the representative of the Lord God Almighty. And when he spoke as the representative of the Most High, he spoke as though he were him. That is how a messenger carried a message back in those days. That is why you'll read in the Bible many times that the word of the Lord came to Kip, for example. The word of the Lord came to Kip. When the word of the Lord comes, it is not reported speech, it is direct speech. If I say, my name is David Clayton, that is direct speech. Reported speech, Sister Rihanna takes my message and she goes and she says, he said that his name was David Clayton. That's reported speech. But direct speech, Rihanna goes to Sister Vanya and Rihanna says, my name is David Clayton. She carries the words. She doesn't report secondhand, she carries the very words. That is the way the Bible messengers carry the word. That's why you could say the word of the Lord came, because the person who carries the word carries the exact statement, not reported speech. I hope everybody can understand. So when Jesus or even an angel spoke on behalf of Yahweh, that's why many times an angel appeared and then the person would say that God has spoken to me, like Samson's parents. Says, we have seen God and we are still alive, because the person spoke as if it were God speaking, even though it was an angel. So that is where Jesus represents Yahweh. And that is different from Jesus' identity, which was Michael. He was Michael. So we have to make a difference between him being Michael as opposed to when he was speaking on behalf of God. So we
The
can
prophet
understand.
Brother David.
Say again?
Prophet did that. The word of the Lord came unto Jeremiah. And then Jeremiah started to speak, so like it was Jeremiah speaking, but it was the word of the Lord. If you look at most of how the prophets are written in the beginning of the book, they will say the word of the Lord in such and such a year. The word of the Lord came upon Jeremiah. And then he began to speak in the first in a direct way.
Yes, exactly. Because it's like God sends his word. And so you take the word and you carry it and you deliver it just as how it came. So if God says, I am God, thou shalt not do this. You go and you carry the word and you say, I am God, thou shalt not do this. You carry the word first and the word of the Lord comes. The word of the Lord travels from place to place. So that was a method of carrying a message in the Old Testament. And a lot of the time when people get into the question of whether Jesus was the Lord God Almighty, they'll jump on verses that's where Jesus is speaking as God because he's carrying the word. And they will say, you see, he was the Lord God Almighty. But he's really speaking on behalf of the Lord God Almighty. His identity was Michael, the messenger, the Son of God. So anyway, let's continue. So this person is Michael. Now Daniel apparently is there with some other people. And we see this, which happens sometimes. There's another person this happened to, and I'll ask you to tell me, who do you think this happened to? Who do you recall? All right, yeah, and it's ahead of everybody else. It says, I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. For the men that were with me saw not the vision, but a great quaking fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. Yeah, something similar happened when Paul met Jesus on the Damascus road. He says the men that were with him, they heard the voice, but they didn't say anything, right? He's the one who saw this great light and had this encounter. But the other people with him didn't. Now, the same thing happens to Daniel. And the men who are with him, they sense this divine presence. And they start to shake and they run away. I don't know, they don't see the vision, but somehow they become aware of some supernatural presence. And they are filled with such a fear that they run away to hide. But Daniel is the only one who sees anything. And we can look at this and gain some insight as to how visions operate. In a vision, the divine presence actually appears, is present, but in a selected way that the only person who can see the vision usually is the prophet. Because I'm a prophet, I can see. God enables me to see what another person can't see. But in many cases, like in this case, they become aware of this supernatural presence because it's not just a vision like you're having a dream. It's a vision like the presence of this person actually comes into the area. So Jesus or Michael actually was on the spot, even though they could not see him, but they felt his presence. He goes on to say, therefore I was left alone and saw this great vision. And there remained no strength in me, for my comeliness was turned in me into corruption, and I retained no strength. I like these little descriptions. We can learn a lot from them. He says, first of all, that there remained no strength in me. In normal parlance, you would say, your knees got weak. Okay, I don't know. The only time I remember ever being in a position like this was after I had been in a car accident. 6 of us were in a little sport car. 3 of us were sitting on the back part. The convertible top was down and we were standing on the back and holding that bar that goes across. My cousin was driving and he drove into a light post at 90 miles per hour. I think he slowed down a little bit, so it might have been about 70 by the time we smashed into the light post. And I remember when I jumped out of the car. I sat there feeling quite all right. When I jumped out of the car, my knees collapsed. And I just fell down on the grass. I wasn't injured or anything. People were saying, go to the hospital and so on, but I wasn't injured. But suddenly my knees had no strength. I just collapsed on the grass. And it was a shock of what had just happened. And something like this happens to Daniel. He has not been struck by a light post or by a car. But the shock of what he sees drains all the strength from his muscles. And he says, there's no strength in me. Next thing he says, my comeliness was turned in me into corruption. What does that mean? Well, comeliness, a person's comeliness, it refers to the person's attractiveness, okay? There are things about you that you consider to be your strength, things that may be appealing, but in the light of the glory that he's seeing, he himself appears to be nothing. He appears to be dust and ashes. You know, the song says, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. And even though this is speaking of a spiritual situation, physically it's the same. If you ever see the glory of a supernatural being, especially the Son of God or God himself, oh my goodness, everything beautiful about you will appear so ugly. It's like a poor illustration. You look at a baby's skin and then you look at your skin. You think your skin is so beautiful and soft and smooth. Then you look at a newborn baby and look back at your skin and you realize there's so many lines and so many wrinkles, and you have compared yourself to something superior, and suddenly you see yourself. And I think Daniel is saying something like this. What I considered attractive, I could see how ugly it was, and there was no more strength remaining in him. Go ahead, Sister Talia.
I just wanted to ask if anyone, or if that ever happened, let me say, the appearance of some divine righteous being, let me say that correctly, wouldn't they not say fear not, for you to know the difference, other than just be fearful, just as the people who were with Daniel ran because of fear? I'm just asking.
Yeah, I know that on some occasions, on most occasions, I can recall the angel saying, fear not. But I'm not sure it's every occasion. And I'll tell you why I think. There are times when I have been afraid and I'm very uncomfortable. It's an unpleasant experience. And there are times when I've been afraid and it's a pleasant experience. And that might sound like a contradiction, but there are times when I've been in the presence of the Lord. Like one many years ago, I got up to pray one morning. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. And as soon as I got up, as soon as I was ready to pray, somebody turned on their music. And it was some dance hall type of music. And immediately I thought, I get up to be alone with the Lord, and I say, this music is going to distract and disturb me. Lord, please let him turn it off. And before I could say off, the music turned off. And make of it what you will, but in that instant, I had a sense of the presence of God. In that instant, it's like a shock hit my system, and I realized that God is here. And before I finished speaking the word, he made the person turn off the thing. And I got a sense. All of you would like to know who this is. Let me answer, okay? This is Brother Sam. Brother Sam calling. I have to take this. All right. Daniel is going to call him. So,
I
all
have
right.
another. I have
I mean,
another question.
let me just explain, Sister Talia, because some people are in the room who don't know who Brother Sam is. Take him, man. Brother Sam is, he has been a part of the fellowship for a long time, has been missing for some weeks or months, so it's very unusual to see him calling. So,
Yeah, he asked me for your number Thursday. I've been giving him the link. He can't seem to get back in the room, and I keep sending him the link. So he asked me for your number, and I gave him your number and Daniel's number. So, yeah, I didn't know he was going to call in the middle of the Bible study, though.
all right. So, Daniel, you talk to him. Yes, Sister Talia, go ahead.
I forgot my frame of thought. I'm sorry.
All right. All
But
right.
Brother David, the angel did say to him, "Do not be afraid."
Yeah, I think,
Verse 12.
yes, all right. We'll get down there. But the point I wanted to make is that sometimes I don't even think it's necessary, because you as a Christian, you have a sense of whether this is an evil presence or a holy presence. I think you will. And if, especially when you come to the New Testament, I don't think you have so often, when a heavenly angel appears, a heavenly messenger, I don't think they say don't be afraid. Like, for example, when Peter was in the prison and the angel appeared to let him out, I don't think the angel says don't be afraid. I think he just hits Peter on his side and says, get up, put on your clothes. No formalities. Because by that time, these people are so integrated into, I mean, they have no fear of an evil angel. Remember that at that time now, if an evil spirit is in a person and they see one of the apostles coming, remember they take off. So they have no fear of any supernatural entity. So I think, it's not all the time. It's mostly maybe under an Old Testament context. Sometimes they'll say, don't be afraid. But I mean, I still believe anybody who is a child of God, you have a sense of whether it's an unholy presence that you need to be really afraid of, or a holy presence that you don't need to be afraid of, but you need to have respect and reverence for. In Revelation, John falls at the feet of Jesus. Yes, and he falls down like he's dead. And I think Jesus says to him, fear not. But remember, it's not abject fear. It's not fear of harm. It's more what we would call great awe, a sense of awe, a sense of respect. It's not a fear that this person is here to hurt me. So Daniel says, I didn't have any strength. Yet heard I the voice of his words. So although he's weak, he falls down, but he's still hearing very well. When I heard the voice of his words, then I was in a deep sleep on my face, and my face toward the ground. It's kind of strange because he says, I am in a deep sleep. I don't understand that. How can you be in a deep sleep and you know exactly what's happening? I think when he says I was in a deep sleep,
He was in a vision. Though he had the awareness, he was still in a vision, so he couldn't. He was no longer operating on his own, but by the Spirit of God. Let me say that.
I think he was in a trance. I think he fell in a trance.
yeah, a trance yeah, trance is more accurate, because when you think of sleeping, you think of having a dream. If you're in a sleep, then you have a dream. But when you're having a vision, you are aware, and you are responsive. In a dream, your mind kind of shuts off, but in a vision, you're able to respond and so forth. So, yeah, I would say that maybe the word trance is probably a better word. Anyway, it says, and behold, an hand touched me, which set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. So he goes upon, when the hand touches him, he goes on all fours, maybe like a dog. He's on his knees and on his hands. And he said unto me, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, And all of you know this phrase, a man greatly beloved. I count it an extraordinarily precious thing that God and heaven can look upon a human being and say, you're a person greatly beloved. When you get a message like this from heaven, wow. Wow, because we know we are special. But when heaven itself sends you the message, this is Jesus, this is the Son of God, and he touches Daniel and says, you are a man greatly beloved. Hold on, let me just pause a moment. I'm not sure that it is Jesus who touches him. It seems that way. But as we proceed, you might see that it is not him, because he says, a hand touched me. It doesn't say that this person touched him. He sees a vision of this person. And where's the person? Is the person standing on the river? It doesn't tell you yet. It says Daniel is by the side of the river, and Daniel sees this person. And now a hand touches him. Later on, you are going to see why I think it's not the person, Michael, who touched him. It's another person. This person says unto him, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright. For unto thee am I now sent. And when he had spoken this word unto me, I stood trembling. Then said he unto me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. So now we get a little insight into the background of what is going on. And I think I'm going to stop on this verse 12, but I wanted to notice this, right? First of all, as Aaron pointed out, he says, don't be afraid, Daniel. Because I guess when you come upon something so absolutely extraordinary, you're wondering, what is the meaning of this? What is going on? What will happen? So the angel says, don't worry. It's not anything to worry about. But he says, from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand. So we see that the reason why Daniel is here, fasting, eating no pleasant bread, mourning 3 weeks, he has a reason for it. And the reason is that he's looking for understanding. Understanding what? Understanding what? The only thing that there is for him to understand is the previous visions he had in chapter 8 and chapter 9, 7 and 2, as we saw before. So he goes to God because he wants to understand. And I still have the feeling that the main thing he doesn't understand is concerning some of these time periods.
It's also important, Brother David, that that we understand that there's no separation between the vision in chapter 8 and the vision in chapter 10.
Right.
It has to be a continuation or a connection, because there's a reason why Daniel was chastening himself, as it says in verse 16. Whichever verse. Yeah. From that time, he began to chasten himself. It's because he wanted to understand the vision. And therefore, whatever is going to happen in this vision that he's having now has to do with that.
Right. That's the point I'm really making. The vision here is not in isolation. Right. It's an extension of what happened in 8 and 9, because that is Daniel's concern carried over, and so he goes to fast and pray. Just like we saw him doing in chapter 9 when he wanted to understand about the 70 weeks. Now, he goes back and God says, from the moment, and you know, this is something that we looked at a couple of weeks ago, and I think Daniel mentioned it this morning, that from the first day, from the day that you pray the first word, thy words were heard. So, as has been pointed out, when you pray one time and you don't see the answer, don't think to yourself that God has not heard, and you need to go and bleed the heart of God, and you need to say, oh, please hear. Why can't you hear? Oh, I'm in distress. Please listen. Words don't break the heart of God. The thing that God responds to is faith and love. You trust God, you put your petition before God, God hears. It is enough. But as I said, sometimes you go back and talk to him about it again, because when you have a father or a friend or a brother, you talk to him about the things on your heart. It doesn't mean that he says, you ask your friend, will you come and help me next month to do so and so? He says, yes, I will. If you go back there to ask him every day, because he's a human being, sometimes he will be annoyed and he will say, man, are you hard of hearing? I said I would come. And if you keep on going and bothering him, he will say, there's something wrong with you, man. But you can understand if you ask the person and then the next day you go and you see me say, man, we're going to have a good time next month when we get together, right? And if you talk about it a lot, he might get weary of the talking, but he will understand, because it's like when you tell your grandson that when his birthday comes, you're going to get him so and so. He's excited. He can't stop talking about it. And he knows he's going to get it, but he wants to talk about it because he's excited. Sometimes we are like that in our dealing with God. And he understands. So, I'm going to, so this person, he has been sent for thy words. In other words, Daniel's prayer has resulted in an angel being sent from heaven. Now, I like to connect two things here. First of all, Daniel's words, sincere words, spoken in faith because you trust God. But here's the other thing too why Daniel is heard. Daniel, a man greatly beloved. Now this morning I was trying to point out that the most important thing in our petitions to God, when we ask God, the most important thing is that we have a living relationship. Relationship is the most important thing. God is biased. And I will explain what I mean, right? God is biased towards his children. God is biased towards his friends. Don't let anybody tell you that God loves everybody equally. While this is true in a sense, in the sense of how God interacts in your life, God has favorites. God is biased. Those who are the children of God, those who have given themselves to God, they do have special affection in the heart of God. Jesus says, if a man love me, he will keep my words, and my Father will love him. It's biblical that God is biased towards those who are his friends. So when Daniel goes to God, he has a head start, because already he's a man beloved. His relationship with God is so warm and close and consistent that there's a special love for this man. Not only God, but the angels. And secondly, he goes to God in faith. That will always be there if you really have a relationship with God. And so, of course, he gets an answer. The first day he begins to pray, God says to the angel, I think it's Gabriel, God says to Gabriel, go and give Daniel understanding. And so Gabriel comes down to give him understanding. Yeah, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to stop here at this moment. I think I am ready for a break. But I'm going to do, since it's Bible class, if there are any questions, I'll take it before I have the closing prayer. If there are any questions, any final comments?
I think that's what Sister
Yes.
Susan was asking you to do, to pray first and then take questions.
Right, but she was suggesting for the morning session, because in the mornings, I usually don't post the questions, but in the evenings, I generally post the questions.
I do have a question. Is I think you explained it already, but I might not have caught it to understand it. The difference between having a vision and being in a trance, and what your movements are like. That's not even important, that latter part.
Yes,
I just want to based on biblical.
Sure. In the Bible, a dream is always when a person has been sleeping, always at night, almost always at night. But it's when a person is in a sleep, then you have a dream. Now, how do you know the difference between a dream from God and a dream from eating too much or from your mind too busy? And I think it's the context of the dream. I know a lot of people have dreams and they say God showed them or they had a vision, but usually when you have a dream from God, it is so graphic, it seems like real life.
Yes.
But you know it's a dream because when you wake up, you realize you were sleeping. A vision is almost always when you're awake. Daniel is by the side of the river. He's not dreaming, he's not sleeping. And he sees something. A vision is when you have an encounter where your mind is taken over and you start to see things that are not there. They're not there physically, or at least they may be invisible, but only you can see. Like John was awake on the Isle of Patmos, Daniel is awake here beside this river, Hiddekel, and Peter was up on the rooftop praying when he had a vision of the animals let down in the sheet. So a vision is when you're awake, but your mind is taken over like in a dream, so you are seeing things that are not physically present. So I would say that is a difference, Sister Talia.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Brother Kip, go ahead.
I just want to get something clarified. So when the Bible says that God has no respect of person, is that talking about him being able to use anyone he wants to use, or is that talking about that he loves everyone the same?
Right. I don't think it means that he loves everyone the same. I think it means that he will use anybody that he wants to use. And secondly, your status in life will not prevent God from punishing you if you need punishment. God shows no favoritism in punishing a person or in using even a donkey if he chooses to use a donkey. But in terms of having affection for people, it is true that those who commit themselves to God more than others, they have a special place in the heart of God. In this sense, he is a respecter of persons. When you say you have respect to persons, usually what we mean is that you treat people differently based on their class, their status in society. You treat a rich man differently from a poor person. It's not talking about personal relationships. It's talking about people's status in society. And I more believe that this is what God means when it says he's no respecter of persons. The context of the statement was that God sent Peter to the Gentiles. He sent Peter to Cornelius. Now, the Jews believed that God was respecter of persons, that he loved the Jewish nation more than the Gentiles. So it was not a matter of personal relationship, it was a matter of your skin color or the blood, the race that you belong to. So they believe God had respect for Jews and not for others. So it's in this context that Peter says, of a truth I perceive, God is no respecter of persons. So that's the context. Sister Elizabeth and then Sister Talia.
I was wondering if we could study the mark of the beast because I'm teaching myself Hebrew right now, and I am disturbed by what I am learning. And I think that is important. And before I just announce it, I'd like for you maybe to call me and let's discuss it. Can we do that?
Yeah, but we're not going to get to the mark of the beast until we get to Revelation. But also, I know you're aware that the mark of the beast is, in Revelation is written in the Greek.
It is, but originally it's Aramaic.
Well, it's still different from the Hebrew, isn't it?
It is you have
And
some Greek um, language, but for the most part, as I begin to break it down, um, I'm just looking at what Jesus said on the cross.
All
What
right.
he said on the cross was not Greek.
No, that was Hebrew. But maybe what we'll do is wait until we get to Revelation, because I don't want to I don't want to get distracted from where we are, because let's take it one chapter at a time,
Okay.
because everything builds towards in Revelation. We are going to call back on a lot of what we have studied in Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's better to just deal with one thing at a time, so we don't
This
get.
is remarkable. Wait till you hear it. It is so remarkable.
All right. I look forward to it.
Okay.
All right. Sister Talia, go ahead. Still muted, Sister Talia.
I'm sorry. I wanted to get some clarity on what Christ had said, interestingly, on the cross, where he spoke, speaking to his father, they know and know not what they do. I know this is not on the topic we just studied, but I wanted to understand that as it applied to the Pharisaical mentality, whereby as I'm reading, it just states that they knew who he was, yet they still wanted to kill him, yet still following the so-called laws that they were supposed to be obeying. So when Jesus spoke, they know and know not what they do. What does that translate to?
I think it's a matter of not the translation. I'm sure the translation is correct. It says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." So of course they know that he's the Son of God, or he claims to be the Son of God. Of course they know that he has done them only good. Of course they know that they are murdering an innocent person. But here's what I think Jesus means. There are times when you do something, but you don't understand the full implication of it. You don't understand. Your mind is not aware enough or conscious enough. For example, suppose I, with my present experience and knowledge, suppose I were to curse God, or suppose I were to say that Jesus, suppose I were to say something blasphemous about Jesus. It's not the same as if somebody out there on the road does the same thing. The person may have the same kind of theoretical understanding that I do, but I know and I have tasted. For me to say it is a different thing altogether. I know, I would know what I'm doing. You could say of the person out there, he doesn't know what he's doing. And what it means is that the full implication of what he's doing, he's not capable of grasping it. So because of this, Jesus is saying to his Father, he's saying what his Father has in his heart already. Those people were forgiven. Why do you think that? I mean, of course, we know that the disciples went out preaching to those same people, and many of them were converted afterwards under the impact of the Holy Spirit's power. So Jesus was right when he said they didn't know what they were doing. They knew theoretically what they were doing, but the impact of it never got to their hearts. I think that's what he means.
Thank you.
Yes, Brother Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, just two comments. Uh, Even though Jesus did speak in Hebrew on the cross, those who wrote the story wrote it in Greek. This one's first thing. The next thing is that as we're going to be looking at the next, going to the prophecy of Daniel chapter 10, I reflected on what you had shared with us from Brother Infande, is that how you pronounce his name? Um, about the four winds. But it's something else, not so much that really, but something else that he pointed out to me in a conversation we had that came to my attention. And he said the little horn pushed towards the south, towards the east, and towards the glorious land. And based on the position of the glorious land, it covers the three of the directions, geographical directions, east, the west, and the south. So it leaves one position that is not mentioned, and is the north. And if this little horn is pushing, then more than likely it's pushing from the north. Would that have anything to do with the king of the north that we're going to be looking at? Would it be the same thing? Is there some connection between this little horn and the king of the north?
Yeah, it's a feasible connection to make. It's a feasible connection. I mean, at the moment, that's the best I can say. So as we continue through Daniel 11, we might see reasons for us to say, yes, it absolutely is something that we can make that connection. At the moment, it just seems to be feasible. All right, thank you very much for the questions and for the comments. I think we're going to end here for this evening. Just before we close, I want to express again my appreciation. I'm going to name them: Sister Nina, Sister Vanya, Sister Rihanna, Sister Helena, Brother Ian, Brother Kip, and everybody who was present, but especially those whose faces I could see. So bless. And there's Brother Warren. Yeah. God bless you all, and thank you for the good fellowship. Let's close off with prayer.
Just letting you know I'm still here.
Yeah. Good to know, Brother Warren. I know that those of you in distant places, Australia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Croatia, and wherever, I know that you are at different times of day, morning, midnight, all kinds of ungodly hours. It's really encouraging to see you sitting there, believe it or not. So I appreciate you. Let's pray.